Hello and welcome back to my channel. Quick catch up today. I'll take a break from my Rainbow Shelves stuff and tell you about what I finished reading, what I'm reading now, what I'm reading over the Easter, over the little break, and a tiny book haul. Right, first of all, the thing I finished was Fern Britton, her first novel, New Beginnings. Now, I finished reading the Adam Neville novel, Last Days, after about a week of being absolutely immersed in that absolutely terrifying world. It was such a dark book, and it got darker and darker, and I was really happy to be stuck inside that. But I was glad when I could read something lighter and romantic and silly. I'd watched Celebrity Big Brother and was egging on Fern Britton as the kind of oldest person there and the cleverest person there, and I'd always liked her when she used to do This Morning, and I thought she'd been given, I don't know, she wasn't as well looked after as some of the other people on daytime TV. I thought she'd been kind of shunted aside a bit when she was the best. Anyway, all these years since she's been off TV, she's been writing novels, which I hadn't read, actually. I was slightly loyal to my friend Carol Matthews because I thought they'd nicked her packaging for Fern's books. Anyway, I've read this in about 2 days flat. It's set inside the world of TV and all the kind of loyalties and betrayals and the terrible agenting, and there's even a murder mystery. But this idea of a woman who's middle-aged with teenage kids, who is widowed and has to go back on TV and take up a very kind of public profile, was fascinating. It was really interesting. How people have to shop for their own clothes and feel so exposed by the kind of terrible magazines, how alone against that world people feel, that they're not living in some kind of protected ivory tower. How got at somebody in the public eye feels all the time. You really get the sense of that. It's very likeable though. There's a great Christmas sequence, which every romantic comedy should have, I think, where everything goes wrong and everybody falls out. That's a great staple of this genre. And then this murder mystery stuff at the end with a kind of race against time and getting the evil character to confess everything. So it kind of has everything. There's maybe a bit of a cut and paste romance with the fella next door, which is a bit convenient, but at the same time, you want them to get together. The mechanics of the book work really well. I really enjoyed it, and I want to go on and read the rest, even if they're set in Cornwall, which every romantic comedy for the kind of the last, in those years anyway, the kind of 2010s, they all seem to be in Cornwall, a place I've never been to, which I'm not particularly bothered about visiting, although everyone goes on about it. It sounds a bit expensive and fancy to me. Anyway, I will go on and read more of Fern Britton. That's my idea. I think I'll get them in charity shops as I see them, as they come up. Although it's nice to read somebody all in order, I think, to watch them, especially when they work in genre fiction, to watch them develop. End of story. This is what I'm reading now. A.J. Finn. A few years ago, he wrote Woman in the Window, which I absolutely loved. I also loved the long New Yorker piece denouncing him as whatever the hell they were saying he was, a kind of fantasist, I think. And I love the film based on his first book as well. And so I was looking forward to this coming out, and I've just started it. It's a book about a writer. So it joins that whole genre of books in which somebody who's a fan and a writer themselves goes to stay with the famous writer and unearths the mystery of them, and has to deal with them being changeable and peculiar and inviting but also forbidding. That whole genre, which, looking back, I first got hooked on when I read In Search of J.D. Salinger, which was a non-fiction book by Ian... Oh, I forget his surname. I'll look it up. In the 80s, I read this fantastic account of Ian Hamilton, the poet from Darlington, actually, trying to unearth J.D. Salinger from his self-imposed exile, and it kind of works. It's a really good book. But lots of novels about writers having their biographers come to stay with them. Notably, my favourite, The Land of Laughs by Jonathan Carroll, which I've talked about on here before, which is a kind of fantasy novel about a kind of Maurice Sendak type kids author who summons a biographer. There must be some kind of 19th century novel that all of this is based on. It must be a novel shape from the past, because so many people use the trope. I hate the word trope. I used to hate the word trope as a literary theorist. Now everybody uses it, and I still hate it. It just describes a feature of a story that gets repeated across other stories. It could be a motif. Motif is a nicer word. Yeah, I think trope is overdone. There's something farmyardish about the word trope. A trope. It's like something that you use to move animals around with. An antelope. Anyway, this is good so far. Maybe 50 pages in. The print is absolutely tiny, so it's wrecking my eyes. Thanks a lot to whoever you are published this. Hemlock Press. I don't even know who they are. Who owns that? Oh, it's HarperCollins. It's my publisher. Well, the one who does my cartoon books. Right, book haul for this week. We went to, look at that, for £2.50. The day that I went to the dentist's, Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I was at the dentist's, which was fine. I need a filling in a few weeks. I have a really nice dentist, and I haven't been for a while. So I got this checkup, and it was a relief not to have anything worse than one filling. But of course, I needed a kind of reward afterwards. So we went to a really lovely cafe that I'd not been to before in Didsbury, and had pastries and coffee at 10 o'clock on Monday morning as it lashed down outside. And we popped into a couple of charity shops, and this leapt off the shelf. £2.50. It's a huge Panini collection of Avengers comics. It's this series called the Marvel Platinum Definitive Series, which I was unaware of. Even then, they were like 17 quid, which 10 years ago, it is expensive, but they're full colour. And this begins with the very first Avengers story. It's introduced by Stan Lee, who was still around there. So you get, 2 whole issues from the 60s, a couple from the 70s, a couple from the 80s, and then on and on up until about 2010. I think this is compiled more or less at the time that the movies are coming out. Look, you get the very kind of lavish and lacquered look of modern comics, which is, it's all very impressive, all of that, I guess. Alienating slightly to kids of the 70s. This is how comics looked. There were 4 colours. They were bold lines, and the artists didn't feel the need to steep everything in darkness. They didn't have to be dark and gritty. 2 of the words I hate most in publishing are dark and gritty. Oh, I've read this one. I don't know where or how, but I have read them. I think maybe I have dipped back into Marvel Comics over the years and read odd issues, but never a whole run of things. Anyway, yeah, dark and gritty is a much abused term. Then, because I was thinking about tie-ins, and there's a very expensive book that's come out, and I forget the author, but about the history of people who write novelisations of movies and TV. I'm very tempted by this. It's expensive because it's self-published. It's from the States. But the fella clearly has done lots of research. and is writing about individual authors who made their living from writing tie-in fiction. So immediately I find that compelling. I love the story of writers who have to patch together a living writing different kinds of stuff. Oddly enough, that's exactly what I've done and had to do all my writing career. And you know, it's an interesting thing when you read about what people get up to and the things they have to write in different genres. There's a great fanzine called The Paperback Fanatic, which has been going for a number of years. It's available on Amazon, and I think it's on print on demand now as a kind of small paperback. And the articles in there often go into the lives of pulp writers and novelizers. This new book seems to concentrate just on people who novelize scripts. Usually they novelize first drafts of scripts before things are actually filmed, so you get that lovely discrepancy between the film on the screen and the book in your hand. As a kid, that was one of the things I loved about novelizations, that they veered off in places and had bits that weren't anywhere else. They were a kind of fuller life of the characters. That was the illusion. Anyway, in the middle of all this on Facebook, there was talk of this woman, Leonora Fleischer, and how she'd written 40 novelizations over the years and was a bit of a go-to person for publishers. So immediately I was looking her up to see what she'd done in the 70s and 80s, was when she was kind of active. She looked like a kind of Fran Lebowitz character, that same kind of roughy-tufty New Yorker, or the woman who is fictionalized in Can You Ever Forgive Me, the film about the woman who writes fake letters. She creates the fake letters from authors and as a way of kind of bumping up her income. I forget her name, and I've got the book somewhere. Anyway, that kind of literary person, although she was a fraudster. I love the idea of people shuffling around the city, from bar to office to library to cafe, and then tapping away on typewriters. It's a very alluring version of the world of writing. Anyway, this woman, Leonora Fleischer, did these, and I went straight to eBay, of course. The Rose, based on the Bette Midler film. She had a theme, clearly, in the things that she chose to do. Stardom and people who succeed against the odds in ridiculous competitions in very competitive worlds, whether it's music or dance or sport. She does some sport ones, which I was less interested in. But The Rose, I was very interested in, loving the film. And Fame, another film I love. And of course, the film is much harder edged than the TV show. So I like the idea of there being a slightly seedier, down at heel version of that story. And Staying Alive, how tacky, how wonderful. The idea of taking these things that are quite tacky and then giving them this New Yorker grit and I won't say dark and edgy or dark and gritty, but you know what I mean, a bit more substance than a kind of a ludicrously camp film like Staying Alive has on screen. The idea of that being a bit sweatier and dirtier. And the first page I read last night, and it made me laugh to think of John Travolta. It begins with the character Tony Manero, who we know from Saturday Night Fever, because this is a sequel. Getting ready for a rehearsal, and how all the other people getting ready, they nodded to each other warily, competitors. There's a funny bit about no interest, shucking off their jeans and shirts quickly and professionally, with no interest at all in one another's bodies. Maybe. He dropped his own gym bag onto the floor in front of the wall between a ginger-haired boy who sat immobile in the lotus position, concentrating on his mantra to center himself. It's this bit. about what he's wearing. He took his denim jacket off and folded it neatly, dropping it to the dusty floor, placing his pants on top of it. He was already wearing a dance belt and black tights and a skin-tight t-shirt of a flexible jersey that moved with him without hampering him. From his bag, he took a black sweatband, which he pulled down over his brow, and a pair of leg warmers. Then he changed into his dance shoes and looked around him. There's something very funny about the idea of this. I can imagine this kind of short, hard smoking, hard drinking woman up all night typing away about these athletes and dancers and people in leg warmers in 1980s New York. There's something just irresistibly funny about that. And also that this donning of armour in the early 80s would include lycra tights and leg warmers is amusing as well. Right, so these are going on my pile of tie-ins, which is here still from the other day when I did my little video about tie-ins. They will go on the top of that pile, I think, to be devoured. Right, I'm gonna go. This has gone on longer than I expected. Socks has been very good on my lap. Slightly uncomfortable though. It's almost lunchtime, so I will go. And I've shot 2 videos this morning, and I've talked my own hind legs off. I hope everyone's well. I hope that spring is beginning. I can see some blue sky at last. I hope you're enjoying what you're reading and that you leave me some comments below. I love the recommendations you leave. I love it when you take up my recommendations and talk about them. And the shared cultural stuff, the memory stuff about memories being triggered by the things I say about other books is really enjoyable. I love this sense of a community that's building, that I'm slowly getting to grips with on YouTube. And I'm pleased that I started doing all of these videos, and I hope that you're enjoying them too. Anyway, goodbye. Leave comments and subscribe, and please do subscribe to my Patreon. It's a real help. There'll be more content on there, and it costs mere pennies. Anyway, goodbye and see you again soon.